In this video, we're going to write code which will enable our user to change their email address. So first of all, let's change this value of the email to the actual email of our user. Okay, so very simply, we're going to go to the PHP file and use the email variable that we created at the top. Okay, so that's the first one. So you're gonna have some PHP code in there. I'm gonna echo this variable. And let's do the same thing inside the email form. Okay, and here we go. That's the one we're looking for. All right. Now let's change the login message to update email message, and also the ID of that message to update email message, and the label goes to email, not login email. All right, so let's save. Let's refresh. Okay, that works perfectly. Now we're gonna start with the Ajax call. So we're gonna copy another Ajax call and then amend it. All right, so the ID of our updates email form is updates email form. All right. And the file we're going to send the Ajax call to is update email.php. All right. And the ID of the error message div is updates email message. Okay, so this Ajax call works the same way as the one we used for updating the password. If anything goes wrong, the PHP file is going to return something which we'll store inside the data variable, and then we're going to display that error message inside the updates email message div. Okay, so let's save our Ajax call. Now let's go to the PHP file. So first of all, we're going to start a session and connect. Okay. And then we're going to get the user ID, okay, as well as the new email, which is supposed to be sent through the Ajax call. Okay. So get user ID and new email. Then we're going to check if the new email exists. Okay, so if the new email exists, then we're not going to allow the user to use that email address, okay, because it's already taken by another user. So check if new email exists. Then we are going to get the current email of our user, okay, because we're going to send them an email address to make sure they own that email address they're using. Okay, so get the current email of our user, And then what we're going to do, before sending the email address, we're going to create a unique activation code. So how are we going to use that activation code? Basically, we used an activation code when we did the sign up process. Now we're going to add another column to our users table. We're going to call it activation 2, and that's where we're going to store the new activation code. We're going to use the activation code when we send the email to our user to check and make sure that they own the new email address they want to use. Okay, so let's create a unique activation code. Okay, and then we're going to insert the new activation code in our users table. All right, so before we continue, let's create this new column. It's going to have the same structure as the activation column. Okay, which means we're going to give it 32 characters for the length. Okay, and that's it. So we're going to add one column after activation. So we're going to use jar. Okay, and let's name it activation 2. And let's save. Okay. So now you've got an extra column there, okay, where we can store our new activation. All right, so next we're going to send an email to our user. Okay, so that email is going to contain a link, exactly the same way we did in the sign up process, but this time the link is going to go to another file we're going to call activate new email. Okay, so that file is going to process the data that we're going to store inside that link. Okay, so the link is going to contain the current email, okay, the new email, and the activation code. Okay, and the whole purpose of this is to make sure that the user owns the new email address that they'd like to use. Okay, so these are the steps. So let's go ahead and start writing code. So to start this session and connect, we're going to do exactly the same thing we did before. So session start and include the connection file. Okay, here we go. Now we're going to get the user ID and the new email, which is sent through the Ajax call. So let's create a variable for each. So user ID, we can get the user ID from the session. Okay, like this. And then the new email, let's call it new email like that. And we're going to get it from the post array, as we use the post method in our Ajax call. Okay. Okay, so if you look at the updates email form, you will see that the name corresponding to the email field is email. Okay. All right. So, all right. Now we're going to check if the new email provided by our user already exists in our users table. Okay. So, first of all, we're going to write a query which will check if that email exists in our table. So we're going to select records from our users table. Okay, you can do select email if you want. It's the same thing. The only thing is that this is gonna return the whole record, basically the whole line for each record. Okay, so select from users where we have the same email, where our email is the same as that email. Okay. Now let's run the query. So it's going to take our link variable and our query, and we saw the results inside the results object. Now we're going to check how many records we've got inside the results object. Okay, so we're going to define a variable. Let's call it count, as we did in the update password. Okay, so this variable is going to tell us how many rows we found in the results objects. All right, now if a similar email exists already in our database, then count is going to be greater than 0. So if count is greater than 0, this means that the email already exists, another user is using it, so we're going to echo an error message. All right, and we can exit the code straight away. Else, okay, we don't need an else statement here if you use exit. Okay, so the error message can be something like there is already a user registered with that email. Please choose another one. Okay, and let's style our div. Give it a couple of classes. Alerts and alerts danger. All right. Now, if the email already exists, then we're going to exit the code right there after echoing the error message. Now, we're going to get the current email of our user because we want us to send them an email, given that everything is fine and we get here. So if we get here, that means that the email chosen by our user is not already taken by somebody else. Okay. So to get the current email, we can do the same thing we did in our profile file right at the top when we managed to get the email address as well as the username of our user. You can do this using sessions. Okay, it's something that you can do, but in our case, we're dealing with a scenario where the user is changing the email and changing their username. So if you store something inside a session and then you refer to that variable after changing something in the database, then you're going to get completely confused. Okay, there is a way of using sessions, given that whenever you update the username or email, you make sure that you update the variable or the value inside the session as well. Okay, to make things simple, I'm going to use the same way we used in the profile file. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this code where we got the username and email. I'm going to keep only the email for now. Okay, and then if I echo that, I'm going to exit the code right there. And let's just change the error message to there was an error retrieving the email only from the database. Okay, there's a comment about using exits. You can use exits wherever you want the code to stop. Okay, so if we don't exit here, it's still fine, but it's just going to continue. Okay, so when you look at previous code, sometimes I did not use exits. In that case, the code will still just continue till the end, which is fine in some cases. But sometimes you want the code to just stop right there, and that's where you use exit. Okay, so let's save and let's continue. So now we're going to create a unique activation code, which we will use to update the new field inside our table. All right. So to create an activation code, we can use the same code we used earlier in the sign-up file. Okay. So let's go to the sign-up file and look at the piece of code we used to create a unique activation code. So here we go. So let's use the same code. Okay, so now we've got a random number generated and stored inside the variable activation key. Okay, now we're going to insert this new activation code in our users table. All right, so let's write the query. So basically what we're going to do, we're just going to update our user's record and insert that number in here. All right, so the syntax is update our table users, and we're gonna set the column field or the activation to field, activation to, we're gonna set that to the value of our activation key like that. And the condition is where user ID is the same as that one. Okay. Now let's run our query. Okay. And let's check if anything went wrong. In that case, we're going to echo an error message. Okay. Else, we are going to send an email to our user. Okay, like that. So let's write something in the error message. Okay, by the way, we need a div there. Like that. Okay, so let's write something inside our error message. So there was an error inserting the user details in the database. Okay. Now, let's look at our email. We'll do this in the next video.